darkest nightmares weren't your own, but a window into someone else's terror, long dead and buried? Imagine living two lives, one in the daylight, mundane, familiar, the other, a relentless, escalating horror that refuses to end even when your eyes snap open. Now, what if the shadows from that dream begin to bleed into your reality? What if the screams you hear aren't just in your head, but echoing from your own hallway? This isn't just a story about a nightmare. This is a story about a nightmare that became real, a cold case that refuses to stay cold, and a terrifying connection to a victim who won't let go. Are you ready to step inside a dream you might never escape? The studio was a tomb of quiet hums, the kind of stillness that only exists after 2 a.m., when the city outside finally sighs into slumber. My name is Alex Thorne, and I'm a late-night DJ, a solitary voice whispering into the void for insomniacs and shift workers. Tonight was supposed to be like any other: lukewarm coffee, a playlist of forgotten indie tracks, and the comforting glow of the soundboard. Predictable, routine, the kind of night where nothing ever truly happens. But tonight, routine shattered. It was precisely 2:47 a.m. The familiar green light of the call-in line blinked. Caller 3, the screen displayed. I frowned. My show rarely got calls this late, and certainly not from an unlisted number. My hand, halfway to cue up the next song, hesitated. My heart, usually a steady drum, skipped. I leaned closer to the console, a prickle of unease crawling up my spine. Just some drunk dialer, I told myself, trying to dismiss the sudden chill that seeped into the studio, a coldness that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It smelled faintly of ozone and something metallic, like old blood. I pressed the flashing button. "You're on the air, caller 3, I announced, my voice a little too steady, a little too rehearsed. Only static. A low, guttural hiss that seemed to vibrate in my bones, crawling under my skin. It wasn't just noise, it was an active, alive static, like something trying to get through, but being violently ripped apart. "Hello? Caller 3, can you hear me?" I tried again, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. Then, beneath the hiss, a faint, almost imperceptible sound. A woman's voice, distorted, choked, barely a whisper. "Help me." My stomach clenched. This wasn't a prank call. This was raw. This was real. "Ma'am, are you okay? Can you tell me your name?" I urged, my grip tightening on the fader. The static intensified like a roar, then abruptly cleared. The voice returned, clearer this time, but still breathless, panicked. "Alex, is that you?" My blood ran cold. My name. She knew my name. My studio. My safe space. It suddenly felt exposed. My past. A tightly sealed box of fragmented memories and a profound sense of loneliness began to prickle. I'd always felt isolated, a ghost in my own life since the accident, since I lost everyone. Now an unknown caller, through a storm of static, knew me. "Who is this? How do you know my name?" I demanded, my professional composure dissolving. A short, guttural cough, then a chilling whisper. "It's Sarah. Sarah Vance. Please. They found me in the woods, near the old mill." The name hit me like a physical blow. Sarah Vance, my cousin, missing for 5 years, vanished without a trace, presumed dead, swallowed by the dense woods outside our hometown. Her disappearance had been a festering wound in my family, a silent accusation against a killer never found. I remembered the endless searches, the fading hopes, the official verdict, likely a runaway. Now here she was, right there, on my call-in line. The air in the studio grew heavy, suffocating. The emergency lights started to flicker across the control panel, a frantic, desperate pulse against the encroaching darkness. Outside, the night was thick and still, but I could feel a coldness seeping into the sound booth, a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It felt like a grave had opened up right here, right now. "Sarah? My God, Sarah, where are you? Are you alive?" My voice cracked, raw with a mix of disbelief and desperate hope. The voice on the other end gave a strained, desperate laugh. "Alive? No, Alex, not for long. They buried me by the old willow. He wants the truth buried with me." Then a sharp, wet cough, followed by a sickening gurgle, a desperate gasp for breath. Then silence. Only the raw, violent static returned, a low, guttural hiss that seemed to vibrate in my bones, crawling under my skin. This wasn't just noise. It was an active, alive static, like something trying to get through, but being violently ripped apart. This wasn't just a call. It was an impossible ghost, a return from a grave 5 years deep. And I felt it targeting us. No, not us. Me. The horror felt personal, inescapable, right from the start.
I was alone with the ghost of Sarah Vance, and I knew with chilling certainty that this was just the beginning. The metallic tang of fear was overwhelming. I was trapped not just in the studio, but in a nightmare that had just become terrifyingly real. Now, I'll deepen the fear, just as it deepened for me. The studio, usually a place of focused calm, became a cold, echoing tomb. Every hum of equipment, every click of a button seemed amplified, distorted, swallowed by the immense, oppressive silence that emanated from the disconnected call line. That silence was heavy, suffocating, punctuated only by that faint, metallic scent of ozone and stale blood that now seemed to cling to the air, a constant, maddening presence. My sanctuary, the place where I controlled the airwaves, felt like a vast, empty stage for something truly sinister. I could almost feel its dark secrets breathing around me, secrets buried in the woods and now resurrected in the studio. I tried to rationalize, to dismiss the call as a cruel prank, a hallucination born of exhaustion and grief. But the details were too specific, too personal. Sarah, the old mill, the willow tree, these were not public facts. My past, a tightly sealed box of fragmented memories from a childhood accident that left me with a lingering sense of disorientation and a fear of losing control, began to feel unsettlingly connected. I had vague memories of that area, a fleeting image of a dark figure in the trees. Was I simply breaking down? Or was something truly infecting my mind, pushing me towards a revelation? I felt my isolation grow, my paranoia bloom. My station manager, Mr. Henderson, usually an early riser, called me at 6 a.m. He'd somehow detected the unusual static from my show's recording and asked about it. My attempts to explain Sarah's call sounded like the ramblings of a madman. He advised rest, less coffee, dismissed it as a technical glitch. He was no comfort. I was on my own. The incidents escalated, bleeding from the recorded static into my reality. Small things at first. My personal phone, usually silent in the studio, would sometimes display unknown caller at precisely 2:47 a.m., even if it was mid-afternoon. I never answered. My apartment, usually pristine, began to accumulate dust in places I'd just cleaned. A pervasive coldness would fill my living room, the exact chilling sensation from the studio. Then the sound, faint whispers, too indistinct to form words, but they knew my thoughts. "You're getting close, Alex." A raspy voice seemed to hiss from the static when I thought about going to the police. My colleagues, usually professional, were acting strangely. Mike, the morning DJ, usually so jovial, kept rubbing his arm as if he was cold, even though the station was stifling. His eyes were wide, darting, like he saw things I couldn't. Sarah, our intern, started humming "Ring Around the Rosie" under her breath, her eyes glazed over, eerily similar to the distant lullaby I'd sometimes heard in the static. The Thorne family crest, a stylized depiction of a thorny rose entwined with a skeletal hand, a crest I associated with a long-dead branch of my family, seemed to appear everywhere. In the condensation on the studio windows, in the patterns of flickering lights from the street outside, even in the steam from my cooling coffee cup. It was a dark, thorny omen, a constant reminder, a symbol of dread. I found an old newspaper clipping in my desk drawer, yellowed, brittle, though I'd never put it there. The headline screamed, "Local girl Sarah Vance missing. Search continues near Old Mill." The article detailed the fruitless search, the rumors of foul play, the official verdict, likely a runaway. But a tiny handwritten note on the margin, almost invisible, read, "She was silenced. He buried her proof." The tension built slowly. Normal life twisted into something profoundly off or unnatural. The station's primary radio console, usually flawless, began to show impossible readings. Phantom signals from dead frequencies, impossible wavelengths, static patterns forming disturbing images. It was like a glitch in reality itself, a digital haunting spreading through the airwaves. My own reflection in the darkened glass of the studio window started to show fleeting glimpses of what shouldn't be there. Faces, pale and distorted, pressed against the glass, gone when I blinked. They were vague, just flashes, but I knew they were there. I knew they were watching. This wasn't just a static-filled call. It was psychological terror. The feeling of being watched, hunted, by an unseen force connected to Sarah's phantom disappearance, growing stronger with every passing minute. I felt like a rat in a maze, and the walls were closing in. I could almost feel the presence of the lost, a deep, silent hum from outside the veil. It was waiting, and I knew, with a horrifying certainty, that it was waiting for me.
My isolation was complete, and the line between sanity and madness began to blur irrevocably. The studio clock, usually perfect, suddenly stopped. Its hands twitched erratically, then locked themselves onto 2:47 a.m., the exact time of Sarah's first ghostly call. This was the breaking point. Reality shattered. The studio, previously a nexus of escalating incidents, now transformed into a terrifying portal. The static, a constant companion, roared from every speaker, not just from the call line, but from the monitors, the microphones, the very walls themselves. The silence from the entities was deafening now, not just an absence of sound, but a heavy, pressing void that filled my ears, pushing against my eardrums. And then the supernatural force tied to Sarah's cold case and its dark history broke through violently. This wasn't a haunting anymore. It was an active, malicious presence that directly impacted me and threatened to consume my reality. The studio flickered. Not just the lights, but the very fabric of the room. The soundproofing panels warped, the equipment seemed to melt and flow. For a split second, my modern broadcast booth twisted into a dark, damp earthen space, a shallow grave. The pervasive coldness intensified, making my teeth chatter. Then a chilling voice, not human, with a chorus of distorted whispers, like 1,000 anguished voices talking at once, reverberated through the air. They overlapped, a cacophony of agony and accusation, and coalesced into a single guttural roar. Sarah's voice raw with fury. "You left me here?" It used my full name, not in a whisper, but a guttural scream that seemed to tear through the very air. "Alex Thorne, you left me here to rot." I stumbled back, my chair scraping against the floor, my hand knocking over my lukewarm coffee. "No," I gasped, the word catching in my throat. "No, I didn't." My mind began to crack. The line between real and unreal blurred to the point of breaking. I questioned my sanity, my memories, and even my identity. Had I done something? What was she talking about? The newspaper clipping, the hint of a cover-up, the years of fruitless searching. They all swam in a chaotic maelstrom in my head. The horror was intensely personal, aimed at my deepest fears, at a trauma I'd buried so deep I didn't even know it existed. I saw shadowy figures pressed against the glass of the sound booth, their faces pale and distorted, their eyes burning with a cold, ancient fury, reflecting the sickly green glow of the static. One of them, a man with a stern, angular face, looked eerily familiar, almost like an older version of Mr. Henderson, my station manager. Another, a younger woman, seemed to be weeping silently. The very air in the studio grew thick and heavy, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. It felt like the walls were shrinking, trapping me. A sudden, piercing shriek from outside the studio, from the hallway outside, made me jump. It was Mike's voice, cut short by a sickening wet thump. Then, an abrupt, terrifying silence. On the glass window of the sound booth, directly in front of me, the green glow intensified. A single, distinct word began to bleed through the condensation forming on the glass as if written in old, dried blood. Cover-up. Was this a curse? Madness? Or was I unknowingly a part of the horror? Perhaps even the perpetrator of the crime? The furious voice roared again, this time from directly inside the console speakers, vibrating the metal against my ear. "He took everything. He took my voice. He took my life. Your manager. His son." My blood ran cold. Mr. Henderson's son? A name, Sarah Vance? Her rival was a Henderson. This wasn't just a missing person. This was a vendetta. The static on the console began to groan, twisting, straining against the circuits, with a horrendous screech. The Thorns and the Hendersons, my family and Sarah's, had a long-standing, bitter rivalry over local property. Sarah was digging too deep. There was a ticking clock now. The entity was coming, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, that it was coming for me, for a past I couldn't remember, but that it clearly did. The studio door began to bend inwards, a single, bloody fingerprint appearing on its cold surface. The final judgment had begun. The door creaked open, revealing not the hallway, but a blinding green-tinged light. From within, a skeletal hand, encased in the tatters of what looked like Sarah's favorite scarf, reached out, its fingers tipped with dried mud and something else. Something black and rotting. It reached directly for my throat, its touch promising a fate worse than death, a direct connection to a 5-year-old crime. As the hand closed around my neck, the phone in my pocket, which had been silent, suddenly vibrated violently, its screen lighting up with a single, chilling message from an unknown caller. The ledger, the willow. The immediate horror found a resolution, but it was never peaceful. The skeletal hand didn't grab me. At the absolute last possible second, when its rotting fingers brushed my throat and the stench of decay filled my lungs, the emergency broadcast system suddenly blared, an ear-splitting tone that ripped through the studio. The green light vanished, the hand retracted, and the studio door slammed shut with a final echoing clang. The overhead lights flickered back on, revealing nothing but scattered glass and my own terrified reflection in the shattered window of the sound booth. Survival felt uneasy and incomplete, tainted by the horrors I witnessed, the crimes uncovered from the ether. There was no true escape. The horror had simply changed form, found a new host. The chaos that followed was overwhelming. Police sirens wailed in the distance, blue and red lights flashing across the deserted station parking lot. Station management arrived, alerted by the emergency broadcast. Mike, the morning DJ, was found crumpled outside the studio door, unconscious, a deep, perfectly rectangular bruise forming on his temple. They attributed it to a fall, a concussion. They found no physical evidence of the spectral hand, only the faint, lingering metallic tang of decay that quickly faded. Just me alone, a single chilling audio recording on my phone of the distorted whispers, accusing me by name. They thought I was having a breakdown, a delusion. They didn't understand. They couldn't. I felt a deep, profound sense of isolation, a terrifying realization that this horror was meant only for me. I tried to go back to my life, but it was impossible. The world looked different. The mundane became terrifying. Every shadow held a possibility. Every faint hum sounded like a spectral whisper. There was no true peace. The doctors cleared me eventually, attributing it to stress and trauma, but the doubt lingered in their eyes, in my eyes. The recurring nightmares continued, but they were subtly different now. I was still a witness, but the perspective was clearer. I saw Sarah Vance, not simply missing, but being silenced, gagged, as an older, heavier man, unmistakably Mr. Henderson's son, stuffed something into her bag. Then the man pulled out a crude, heavy object and smashed it over Sarah's head before dragging her limp body toward the dense woods near the old mill, where he disappeared with her. The scream followed. And then, the final devastating twist. A revelation that shattered everything I understood about myself, the antagonist or the crime. Days later, back in my apartment, unable to shake the visions, I recalled the phone message, the ledger, the willow. My father had an old, leather-bound ledger, rarely spoken of, kept in a dusty box in his study. I'd seen it once years ago when I was small, hidden deep beneath his desk. It detailed a series of land acquisitions, contested claims, and bitter legal battles between the Thorne and Henderson families, dating back decades. A specific entry detailed a large parcel of woodland near the old mill, signed over to the Hendersons just months before Sarah vanished. The willow was a specific ancient tree marked on the old maps as a boundary marker, directly above a hidden cave or hollow. The ledger was the record of the true ownership, the motive. I felt it then. The true horror. Not just a haunting. I wasn't just a witness. I was connected. My own father, a descendant of the Thorne family, had known about Sarah's disappearance, and crucially, about the dispute. He had done nothing, fearing exposure, fearing the truth. He was haunted, and he passed on the fear, the knowledge, the guilt. I was not the next victim because of a random radio broadcast. I was the next victim because I had opened a channel that my family had kept silenced for decades. I was now irrevocably changed, becoming something monstrous myself, carrying the ghost's curse forward, a new form of torment. My survival was a new, inescapable form of torment. The cycle was not broken, it was merely transferred, and I knew with a chilling certainty that the true nightmare had only just begun. My phone, still in my hand, now vibrated faintly. The screen was black, but the dialer showed a single chilling number, my own. I'll close with a powerful message, final warning that lingers with you long after the screen goes dark. A truth about humanity tied to the ghost's dark secret. A truth that now owns me. Some secrets aren't meant to be kept. Some voices aren't meant to be silenced. I learned that as the faint static echoed in my mind, forever. The greatest monsters aren't born, they're made. And sometimes they cling to the living not to commit a crime, but to demand justice for one long past. And sometimes they cling to the innocent, who aren't so innocent after all. Those whose family lines are tainted by ancient lies and unforgivable betrayals.